Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of this podcast. Today, we're going to be featuring Rob Whiteley, who's going to is the CEO for Coder. And I try to tell you, Rob, it really feels good. It feels like the perfect way to start this off on the right foot, having you on board. I'm really excited about what we're going to be doing here with this podcast. Hope you are too. You got any thoughts before we kick off the show?
Super honored to be your first guest. That's awesome. I'm really excited to see where we go with this. So, all good.
Excellent. Well, before we jump into the tech and what we're going to be talking about today, would you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself? You know, what being the CEO of Coder means day to day and what kind of initially drew you to Coder and its mission?
Yeah, I had the privilege to work at another open source project called Nginx. Ended up getting acquired by a company called F5. And for the last couple years, I got to run that as a business within Five. And so I just love being at the forefront of a technology that was beloved by developers, but needed by companies. And how do you do that in a way that is kind of, for lack of a better word, authentic, right? And just an amazing opportunity. But that kind of gave me the itch. And then, Kyle and Amar called me one day. I wasn't really looking, and they said, "Hey, we've got this thing called Coder. We think it could be pretty big, but we need a CEO." And as I got to know them, it was really interesting. My initial kind of, because you asked me what drew me here. My initial finding was, wow, you guys do all the hard stuff easy, and all the easy stuff comes hard. And what I mean by that is they'd created a technology that was loved by developers. They were getting traction in the enterprise. There was a great culture. And so those are all things that if you don't get them right in the beginning, they're almost impossible to build. And instead, that was all there. And they're like, but we're having trouble marketing and getting sales going. And as a person who kind of comes from a go-to-market background, I was like, ooh, that's the easy part. So anyway, it just felt like a good match. And so about 2 years ago, I joined.
All right. Well, what inspired the founding of Coder? And how has that vision kind of changed since you've been founded?
The short answer is Minecraft, the video game. The slightly longer answer. So look, the Coder was founded by three gentlemen, Kyle and Amar, who are still here today, and John Andrew. They met as teenagers playing Minecraft, kept in touch, and one of the things that they enjoyed doing was developing software plugins for Minecraft, and kind of built up a nice little side business doing that. And then over time, they sort of realized there's this challenge, though, where we would develop some of these plugins and then they wouldn't work on the Minecraft servers. And it was because local environments didn't match cloud environments.
Yeah.
And so that idea kind of stuck with them. They all went off to separate colleges, but then said, nope, this idea is too compelling. They dropped out. They tried various ways to monetize it. It wasn't until they created an open source project called Code Server, which took the really popular VS Code environment and put it in a browser. And then once it was in a browser, I could then host it remotely on the same environment as a server. And now I could code in the cloud. And so just kind of took off from there. But that was originally the problem. And it, like most technology that actually has enduring value, it started by just a couple of people trying to solve a problem they had. And in this case, it was Minecraft.
Well, and that's interesting, coming from a Minecraft background, that's what started all this. I mean, when we start talking about development environments, there's a real need. This has been an issue for the dawn of since we started development, right? How do you keep things in seat? And we're starting to see some really incredible growth in these development environments. What do you think is driving this shift?
Yeah. Yeah. So I like to start really what I like to call dumb and dopey, just break it down into pretty simple, and then we'll go into more details, make sense. But look, I think there is a phenomenon where people want to shift from a local environment, which is the way we've developed software as a developer, as a log into an IDE, I write code, I commit that code to a repository, really hasn't changed in 20 years. But everything around me, I ship the code to the cloud, I deploy it in the cloud, I test it in the cloud, I run it in the cloud, but I develop it locally. And so I think for me, if you really just want to, we're just shifting that last software development task that was still being done locally to the cloud. And so now you can have sort of an end-to-end cloud native, if you will, way to create code. So, okay, why do I say all that? To me, whenever you have a trend that starts taking off, it's always a little bit of luck and a little bit of hard work. And I think For us, the fact that developers suddenly found themselves remote in a pandemic,
Hmm.
and yes, I am sort of indicating that a pandemic created luck for us, which is a sad thing, but still, we developers needed a consistent, secure, safe way to access when they couldn't be in the office. And for very few companies hadn't invested in that as a durable thing. And we suddenly found the whole world needed it. And then what came out of that was giving developers autonomy and freedom actually allows us to go faster and build even cooler projects. And so that was sort of step one. I think step two was okay, but wow, we can't let developers go completely wild. It could put us at risk. And so we ended up with this go fast and break things because we suddenly needed to move all of our businesses online and get through a global pandemic to, well, we want to go fast but not break things.
Right.
And that's what a cloud development environment, at least a good one, does, is it basically allows the developer to go fast, autonomy, tool choice, really beefy capabilities in the cloud, but do it in a way where the enterprise has some governance and controls. And so to me, then takes that going back full circle. I want to shift my environment from my laptop to the cloud, but I want it to feel magical. I want to feel like I'm still doing something that I couldn't do before. And I think that's what we've unlocked as an industry the last few years that's really kind of made this space take off.
Well, and I mean, going along that, especially when we're talking about developers, I mean, there's the old adage that software is eating the world. I think that's still true. When we take a look at kind of the cloud native landscape and all the projects, all the open source that's coming in, people are coming up with really interesting and innovative ways to attack software development. Is that something that cloud development environments do? Does it provide kind of a safe space to play with some of those technologies and allow, for lack of a better word, developers to stretch their legs and try to find something new?
Yeah, I think so. I think to me, I found it has two kind of unlocks. Okay. So the first is I'm an experienced developer. I actually spend a lot of my time battling my own environment. Maybe I'm asking for escalated privileges, or I need to install a tool that has to go through an exception process, or my system has just drifted because I was doing some pretty unholy things to it to try to get a certain thing to work. And so that we just somehow got used to that. That X amount of time, hours was spent just sort of battling that environment. If I can just express all that as code and make it something that I can just constantly get back to a known good state, I suddenly free up hours of battling my environment to actually work on the project. And
Right.
so I think what we first saw were these really talented developers gravitating to it because it felt infinitely more powerful and I didn't have to fight it. But then what we weren't really expecting was all of these other folks that were either less skilled in development or developer adjacent, like data scientists who have to do some basic Python code or ML operations people that are training large language models. Suddenly, this made it accessible to them because they could quickly set up an environment. They could set it up probably outside of their IT department in a quick and self-serve way and just get in and write the little bit of code I needed to write. And that's where I think things really started to unlock. I don't, it's not really democratization, but it's more just making it approachable, right?
Right.
And so that's where we've seen the magic. So we have a customer here in the Bay Area. They employ 400 developers. They employ 600 data scientists. The 600 data scientists went to Coder before the developers did, right? Because they got such value out of just not having to think about how do I get to Python to write the things that I need to do for my Jupyter notebooks, as an example.
Right. Yeah, I think that's very interesting. I mean, what you're talking about, coders, developers, they just want to do what they were hired to do, which is write code. We are asking more and more of developers every day. And something like this, it seems like a really good idea. It seems like something that developers would get behind. But, what do you see are kind of the main challenges that organizations are facing if they want to move to something like cloud development environments?
Inertia. Uh, this is one of those things where I feel like all technology shifts are a David and Goliath type story. And it's, could be that David's a startup and Goliath is the incumbent. Here, Goliath is just status quo. I've been using JetBrains for 10, 20 years. I liked how I developed my Java. It's not broken. I don't need to do anything different. And so, in a world where, to your point, we're asking our developers to do so much, asking them to think about a new way of doing things, even if that new way is better and reduces friction over time, it still requires I stop and just take the 5, 10, 15 minutes to learn the new thing. In a world where you don't feel like you have any time, that can be enough friction. And so I think what most companies struggle with is a awareness of behavioral. How do we convince our developers that this thing over in the cloud is better than their local
Mhm.
environment? And so it's almost like they have to internally market it.
Right.
And as we all know, developers hate to be marketed to. So, how do you do it in an authentic way that helps get people excited? So, I think that's the number one challenge. And then beyond that, there's all sorts of additional, I think, things that I've seen companies, there could be security benefits to security challenges. There could be cost benefits to cost challenges. So it's a new technology that not a lot of people had on their horizon a couple years ago. And so it doesn't fit neatly into their budgets and their agendas. And so they kind of have to make it happen along the way. But I think that's already changing just now that it's matured a little bit.
Gotcha. Well, and I mean, as we start looking, we talked about all the projects and tools that are out there, but we're also seeing a lot of things that are coming in to help the developer experience, to help developers make them more productive. AI is a huge thing that's coming in today. You've got things like Cursor and Aider and things coming in that are helping with that coding. What do you think are you seeing within AI and cloud developer environments?
Yeah, I think, to me, AI is interestingly very controversial. It isn't for me. I get it. I think it's going to be a moment, and it's one of those once in a 10, once in a 20-year technology revolutions.
Hmm.
And we can talk about that if it makes sense. But specifically, look, the point of cloud development environments is to allow developers to do the thing that they were hired to do, write code,
Hmm.
give them more of their time back to do that. AI does the same thing. In fact, we've had customers measure it, right? We have one large financial services company here in the US where when they first rolled out Coder, they noticed that 5% of the developer's time was spent writing code. And that's not to say 95% of their time was wasted. There's always some amount of stand-ups and emails and Slack and, TPS reports. And so you will find some but it should be closer to 50%. And that's not a magical number, but if you look at the best software shops in the world, the Googles and Metas of the world, that's what they can achieve. So why that 10x gap? Well, they deployed Coder, and we don't have to talk about that, but they went from 5 to 12%. So they more than doubled the time spent writing code. Then they deployed Copilot, and it went from 12 to 25%.
Wow.
So to this, and by the way, they have 7,000 developers. So to have a population of that size essentially quintuple the amount of time they can spend doing their core task, that's an overused word, but that is transformative. That is a big deal. And so to me, AI has its place alongside developers. It is a thing that allows me to offload grunt tasks or get up to speed on projects quickly or helps me, maybe I am trying to collaborate with someone and I don't have time to write comments or document. All of this just makes offloads the certain tasks that AI is good at, which tends to be easier tasks, and frees me up for the higher value. And one of the things you'll hear from our founders, an example is, I just want to solve things,
Hmm.
right? And are you really solving things if you're doing those low level tasks? No.
Right.
So offload those, like, treat AI like your intern at your disposal, and you work on the high level, more cognitive things.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's all about, again, developer productivity, developer experience. I mean, we're seeing a lot of these tools come out. You mentioned Copilot. We're seeing a lot of investment and really some hype around AI right now. I mean, we've went through this before. Those of us that have been around, we saw this with the dot-com bubble. I mean, do you think there are any parallels with what we're seeing with AI today and the dot-com? And what
Yeah.
lessons do you think that we need to apply that we learned from back then to now?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think we are absolutely in a bubble, and that's not bad. That's not a bad thing. There'll be casualties of that, but to me, I kind of mentioned this. Every once in a while, a technology comes along that leaves the world different.
Hmm.
right? .com is one where I don't go to Blockbuster to rent my videos
Right.
anymore, right? Social came along. It completely changed the way we communicate on a global scale. It changes the way politics, wars, everything. It's a very powerful transformative technology. AI feels like that. It feels like the world post AI is going to be different than before this technology mainstreamed. And there are other trends, like I don't know if you, but I grew up in a big data,
Hmm.
and that felt like, is the world different after? I don't know. Maybe it's
Right.
in the background somewhere. So some technologies achieve this kind of hyper hype, right? And some don't. I think AI is at that, but it's deserved because I do think the world will look different afterwards. It'll change what jobs people go get. It'll change how I educate. It'll change the way I think about hiring, which it's
Hmm.
already doing here at Coder. So to me, very, very well deserved. It does harken back to .com. The difference is we've been through a few of these, and so we can look back at .com and realize that wow, there's a lot of really lousy investments that were bankrupted. There was a lot of products that were thinly veiled and didn't really offer value. There'll be a little bit of that here, but I think largely we've gotten good about that over the last 30 years. But no doubt there'll be winners and losers like any major trend.
Well, and I think that's a very important, comment to make there is when we think about .com, a lot of people have a very bad view on what happened with the .com bubble. A lot of companies got caught up in it because everybody was trying to do .com. The same thing happened when we looked at data centers. Data centers went to colos. Colos then gave birth to the cloud. Yeah, some bad things happened because of that bubble, as all bubbles do, but they still changed the world. They still changed how we interact with technology on a daily basis. And I'm guessing that, when we're looking at cloud developer environments and how developers are going to use this, we're hearing a lot in the news about, well, AI is going to replace developers. I don't believe that to be true, but I'd like to get your take, right? Yes, there's a bubble coming, but what do you think the end impact is going to be? Do you believe that we're going to see AI replace development?
No, I think it'll change the definition of what a developer is. And so I think there'll actually be net more developers in the world as a result of this. If we kind of unpack that a little bit, a developer today equals a software engineer, right? Someone who has experience in coding languages, is technical in nature, is analytical and problem solving, right? There's a stereotype of what a coder looks like today. Um, to me, as AI evolves, it's going to allow those people to get more productive, so they will remain. But we're also going to get to a point where less technical people, me, I can now code. I can create a website. I can create all different applications
Mhm.
inside the business that solve a problem for me. And so that to me is exciting. And there are far more knowledge workers. I mean, developers only make about 10 to max of 20% of unless you're, a pure software company. But even that's 10 to, so there's 80% of people in a company that could probably benefit from AI in some way, shape, or form. So I think we end up with net more developers. It's just they're not all software engineers. So that's good. But yeah, there's going to be, I kind of call it a bathtubing effect. So if you know the engineering reliability curve where things tend to have low failure rates at extremes and in the middle it's high, we're going to end up seeing that with a developer talent curve. You're going to have really junior developers or citizen developers that are using AI. You're going to have really senior ones that are using this as like an entire army of bots at their disposal to write code. And I think a lot of the software engineers in between are going to get displaced because that will get replaced by AI and agentic AI in particular. But like I said, that'll get filled in with a different curve where more and more people identify as coders.
Well, and you touched on agentic AI. I want to come back to that. I do want to ask you, one question before we kind of get started.
Sure.
Again, with all the hype that we're hearing about AI, the fact that you see every company in the world trying to put AI in their products, what is Coder doing to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff here? What are they doing when it comes to AI impact on development? And what are your thoughts on how you're going to move forward with this?
Yeah, I think if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have said we're proudly not an AI company. And it was because we did not want to AI wash what we were doing, right? And just say, hey, we're like everyone else. Like I could have renamed the company Coder.ai instead of coder.com, and probably would have been a lot easier to do some fundraising. But it didn't feel authentic. That's not what we were doing. And so the approach we took was to hang back and say, look, AI is a tailwind. It's helping developers become more productive. We help developers become more productive. So a rising tide lifts all boats. And a lot of customers use us to provision AI tools, especially coding assistance tools, inside their developer stacks. Great. So that's but to me, we didn't do anything with the AI. We didn't unlock anything. We were sort of a glorified provisioning engine for it. And so I would have said that we were not AI at all. I think that's changing. And I think it's changing for a very specific reason, which is kind of the fundamental unit of work inside of this is the IDE. It is the editor. It is where I go to write code. And what I see is actually over time, that's going to become an agent that's writing the code. And I might not even interface with it through an IDE. I might interface through it, whatever workflow is best. And that's really what Coder is. I called us a provisioning it. We're a workflow engine. We're just trying to get developers in and out of certain workflows, depending on what they're trying to do. That workflow could be interacting with AI directly, not through an IDE. That feels like an AI company, an AI solution. So I think we're going to get there, but I'm a huge fan that our users will take us there, not, hey, we're going to put a stamp on the website that says we're a certified AI company. We'll let the market tell us if that feels right. I think our job is just to listen, to try to solve problems that make developers less productive, and then do that in a way where we can insert AI more and more, because that's simply the trend of where things are going. And I think that'll end up being something that, a year from now, I think we'll be an AI first company at that time.
All right, so we've got a lot of, there's a lot of different AI out there. We've got RAG, you got generative AI, you've got agentic AI, which you brought up. I would, for those that are listening, kind of give your explanation of what agentic AI is, but also how do you think that's going to change development in the next couple of years?
Yeah, happy to do so, but I'm just going to tell you now, it is something that I don't even know if seeing is believing, experiencing is believing. Nicky, we were just on a demo earlier today here in the company as an internal, and it you just see light bulbs go off. And so I'll try to explain it, but my real call to action would be just go do it. Just tinker with these things. But look, I think to me, generative AI is like the ultimate assistant. You can parachute it in and it can help you solve a task, but you're the human, you're running the task, and you kind of put it in your workflow. Agent is more autonomous. It's able to complete tasks with a deeper level of reasoning, and it can go through a process to figure out what is needed. And so it goes from this assistant that is like the old Microsoft Clippy, where you might go to it and say, I need some help, to a full-blown virtual human. It's an intern. Today, it's not the world's best intern because the technology is maturing and it will mature rapidly, but it'll soon probably be as good as a 2 to 3 year experienced developer, going to a 4 to 6 year, so on and so forth. But that sort of autonomous and an ability to reason and look at its surroundings and make choices. And then you get to dial up how permissive do you want that to be? Do you want it to pause and ask you, or do you want it to just go ahead and solve? And so to me, it's just fundamentally different because of how much more it can do, because I'm not putting it in my workflow. It's actually its own wholly contained workflow onto itself. And I'm just giving it instructions like I might give a junior team member instructions.
Yeah, it's funny. I started laughing because you said Clippy, and I heard equal waves of nostalgia from one side and then a bunch of groans from the other. Clippy's one of those things you either love or hate. So if I understand you right, I'm sorry?
Or love to hate.
Love to hate, yeah. So if I understand you right, when we start talking about agentic AI, this becomes, you use the word assistant, but today what we're using AI for as an assistant is we ask it something, it gives us information back. But agentic AI, we're going to be able to tell it to go do something for us, give it parameters on what its boundaries are, and then it's going to go do that work for us.
Yep.
All right.
Exactly. Yeah. I think of generative AI as it helps give you a little bit of information to complete a task. Agentic AI completes a task and brings you an outcome. I'm
All right.
done, right? May or may not be right, but it'll have completed it.
Yep. And when we go back and we talk about that bathtub curve that you were talking about, I could see something like this being very useful for some of those mundane, kind of menial tasks that developers are doing. They're not a whole lot of value, but they take a lot of time when you're looking at, debugging, you're looking at format, code, bringing things up. Would you see agentic AI as something that could go in and do those kind of tasks for developers, freeing them up to really do a problem solving?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of what you have to think about anything AI is it's basically trained on the internet,
Mhm.
right? And so the more things have been done in the world, the more it has as reference, and therefore it'll be better at it. There have been thousands, millions of websites that have been created.
Mhm.
So it is really good at creating websites. But a lot of us, coder included, we don't put our source code out in a place where it's easily accessible to get trained on. And so complex systems, complex applications, it's not as good at yet. But being able to do those simpler tasks, I think it's very good at. And for a lot of developers, I don't know if they want to spend their day thinking about, oh, I have to go fix this bug and round off this corner on this button, or I
Mhm.
have to go create a dark theme so that we have light and dark. I mean, those are have a big impact on the finished product, but I don't wake up in the morning being like, I really hope I get assigned dark theme today. And now I can offload those things and work on net new functionality.
Yep. Well, you say that with dark theme, but I know a lot of people that would probably fist fight you if you try to come up with a website that doesn't have dark theme on it, right?
Yeah, you get
Yep.
your AI credentials revoked, that's for sure.
100%. So, I mean, you can't talk about AI without somebody bringing up the whole Skynet concept. What keeps you up at night when you're thinking about the integration of AI with developer workflows?
It's interesting. Look, I won't even lie. Here within the walls of Coder, we do not have 100% alignment on what this all means moving forward. Our mission is to make developers productive. If we're replacing them, does that make and I step back and I say, okay, first of all, nope, let's not go down that path in that way. I think what we have to do is just say, look, our job, first of all, it's going to be years before we replace developers. I think this is going to be predominantly about making people even faster and more productive. And so it's really an augmentation. But whether you believe that or not, it's not for us to decide. I think it's for us to try to make the technology safe and usable. And our superpower is to make it safe and usable, especially within larger enterprises that have very complex environments. And then how you choose to use it, I don't even think we can dream how customers are going to use this moving forward, nor should we, right? Our job is just to supply the technology in a way that they can then unlock it. And so for me, it's really, in an absolute sense, very hard to answer the question of what keeps me awake at night because it's exciting and it's I think, net positive. But I do worry that when you get a technology like this that's very hyped, you get what I call the airline magazine phenomenon, which is some executives flying opens up the whatever free and says, reads about AI and says, this is the future, let's do it. And now you're doing it for the wrong reasons, right? You have to have purpose and a problem you're solving and an outcome you're shooting for. And so I do think we'll enter a hype curve where a lot of this gets mandated top down. It doesn't get done well. It doesn't have the desired effect, and people walk away from it for some time. So that keeps me awake at night, just because I think that can be easily avoided, but we'll still end up going through it because we seem to with every major technology.
Excellent. I really liked your airline magazine points. It's something I may steal from you because I think that's a very good way to describe that is, we are looking at, products out there today. It seems like everybody's putting AI in some fashion or form, and really it leads to that hype. It leads to some of that disassociating that people do with AI because they're saying everything's got to be AI, but sometimes it just doesn't make sense. When we're looking at something like as complex as what we see with development, being able to have something there that kind of serve as an extra pair of eyes, I see that as being very helpful. I see developers, again, going back to, we just want to write code and solve problems, being able to take some of that, you know, menial tasks off of them, being able to increase their productivity. We're now, I suspect we're going to be able to see development teams of 5 do the work of 15 or 20 when it comes in. But your case about use cases is 100% correct. I don't think we've even scratched the surface of what people are going to do when they start looking at what they can accomplish with this.
Yeah. I'll give you a quick example. We're working with this company where the problem they're trying to solve is COBOL. There's not enough programmers out there that know it. Well, if I can train an agent to know it and make that available, then when I have to go interface with those systems and refactor some code or make a change, I can contact my virtual COBOL programmer to make that change.
Mm-hmm.
Did I displace anyone? No. I probably created something that couldn't easily be solved otherwise. And it allows me, the developer, to get back to what I'm really trying to do, which is probably surround that mainframe with something that's going to be more modern and useful for my customers today. So I think we're actually entering a very interesting and bold environment where, like I said, a lot more net new software will get created.
Nice. Yep, I'm with you. So let's reference back to kind of the .com conversation that we had. We are seeing a lot of companies, as we just talked about, are rebranding themselves as AI first. You're talking about agentic AI. We're talking about cloud development environments. How would you describe Coder's approach to AI integration?
That's a good question. I don't have a straightforward. I think you're actually in the future going to be talking to Kyle. I would really recommend asking him that same question. But again, here's how I think about it. By the AI is becoming mainstream so quickly that it seems a little disingenuous in how you talk about it if you're not careful. For example, how many SaaS companies describe themselves as SaaS companies? It's sort of just implicit to the delivery they do. Or how many social companies? It's kind of, some of these things in the beginning are needed to help differentiate, but then once everybody's doing it, it would almost be, I would need to say if I'm not using this technology. So I think we're in a rare period where, yes, you will see us lean into this trend because we're at the forefront of helping developers. This is the technology that's helping developers. Therefore, we have to have an opinion and a way to do that. But I really want us to take a very measured approach. So, for example, before we do anything AI related, native to the product, we will dog food it first and we will see how is it solving our problems. Because to me, open source is more than just your code. It's about describing how and why you do things in a very open way. And so we want to be able to say, look, this technology might not be right for everybody. This is how it was right for us. This is what we did. These are the results we got. And let them decide that. Does that make us AI first? I think so. We'll be in the conversation and we'll be helping try to move the industry forward on different topics, agentic being probably the most exciting for me. And so I'd like to get us to a point where that is at the forefront of what we do. But the last thing I'll just say on this is I want to meet a customer wherever they are, right? They may be at a point where they're just trying to get people off of laptops. They may be at a point where they're trying to make Cursor available to everybody so that there's AI code assistance. They may be at the point where they're trying to spin up thousands of agents to do virtual coding. Wherever you are on that spectrum, I just want to help make sure that it's done safely and productively. And so to me, the more to the right in this diagram, the more AI you were, but we'll still have plenty of use cases where there's just good old fashioned keyboard coding.
Excellent. Well, I mean, when we look at this and what you just described, with Coder being what's known as a CDE platform, but we're looking at bringing in this agentic AI. How does that create a different value proposition? I mean, we've got companies out there, and you may have developers that are going to be looking at this and saying, I'm already using Cursor or Copilot or Claude Code. What do you think is that Coder's going to bring to the table that maybe some of these other AI companies don't?
Yeah, I think the light bulb moment I had was, look, if you are using Cursor, which I love Cursor, it is a great technology. It's probably the best IDE to make AI native to its interface. And if you're a programmer, if you're a coder, you'll use it, you'll be much more productive. But if you're not a talented developer or even a not so talented developer, it's not the right tool for you. So for me, what agentic AI does is it is the right tool for a different set of jobs. And there's probably going to be some degree of healthy interaction between the two. Like, for example, I was watching one of our developers where he was having Agentic AI, in this case, Claude Code, solve a GitHub issue, fix a bug in our product. It got to a working set of code. He then opened it up in Cursor, kind of made the code a little more elegant. But what it did is it saved him probably 3 hours of time because he got to a working code and then used his artist's capabilities to make it even better. That is a great one too. I think that's going to be the state we live in. Again,
Right.
it's I'll offload tasks to my new intern called Agentic AI. They will complete those tasks, and then it comes back to me and I'll finish it or check it or do its peer review. The key is, as anybody who's ever had an intern, they can sometimes be more work than they're worth, right? Like I now have to go train them and talk to them and check their work. But the idea is they soon graduate from intern to an entry level employee, and that's when you get the ROI. I think we're going to go through that with Agentic, where I'm going to actually spend quite a bit of time babysitting it, looking at it, helping it, but it's learning and it's getting better. And then within a very short period of time, it'll be that sort of 2 to 3 year experienced developer that is truly pair programming with me.
Yep. And I love the fact that you brought up pair programming, because that's the first thing that kind of came to my mind when you were talking about this is pair programming. There's a lot of advantages to it. You're getting more eyes on it. It sounds like with Agentic AI that you're kind of still keeping that pair programming, but now your pair may be a virtual programmer.
Yeah.
And depending on how you teach that agentic, that agent on what it's doing, it could be well versed in the way that your company wants to do code versus everything else that's out there. And I think those are some decisions that are going to have to be made by companies when they start looking at this. Is private, do we train our own, do we use something public, what kind of security aspects happen with that? I mean, for you, what do you find is most exciting about this kind of intersection between development environments and agentic AI?
Yeah, I was talking to a customer yesterday, and they were very skeptical on agentic. It's no way we're going to allow that in our environment. This is a large company. They have about 20,000 developers. Half of them are outsourced to a household provider that many people know.
Mhm.
And so it's like, okay, well, you trust these third-party developers to access your source code and create value for your company. How is an agent any different? It's a third-party virtual developer that you can't see because they're sitting off and offshore in some other country, and then they're just completing work and giving you code back. So to me, this just opens up and it's going to change, I think, the entire economics of how we think about procuring software talent, right? And to me, that, like I said, A, will have a little narrowing effect of because of that bathtub curve, but overall net expansion of the amount of people that can create software now. So to me, very exciting time, and it will be skeptical, but we have patterns that we can match here. An agent is really just a contractor. It's an untrusted third party source. I'm going to have to put them in a secure environment, give them limited access, let them do their work, check it, and then I will use it if it's valuable.
That's an interesting concept, Rob. I mean, they're the new contractor. I mean, again, we could compare this back. The the colo was the new data center. Now we're talking about agentic AIs now being virtual. Again, I think we're going to see some people that want to push back on that and say, well, you can't replace a human developer. That's where the imagination and the creativity comes from. And I don't think that's what you're saying, but correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm hearing here is, again, it becomes a contractor that does the work that's very defined. We know what the outcome is. We're still going to need those developers to use their creativity to solve the problems that we want to do. Doesn't mean that we won't use the agents to help do that, but those agents are going to do kind of a known qualified work, whereas we're using the development as it's today to create and solve problems.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the one version of this phrase I'm about to say you hear all the time in AI, which is applied to this, developers aren't going to get replaced by AI. They're going to get replaced by developers using AI.
Mhm.
So I think what we're going to see is this is just going to be another tool in the tool chest that allows me to be more creative and work on higher value stuff because I have my own personal contractor now.
Right. Well, and I mean, it's going to make developers kind of CEOs of their own little company. And when you really kind of think about this, I'm going to hire as a company, I'm going to hire a developer to do a product for me. Well, now that developer may have two, three, four, or five agents that are helping them do that work. So they almost kind of become their own little contract company within a
Yeah.
company. That's
And
very interesting.
And if you want to tug on that thread, then you have to think about communicating requirements, being clear in your maybe skills that not all developers. So I think we're going to be in an interesting world, right? And we talk a lot about how this will change the profile of a developer. But look, it's all good, healthy evolution in my.
Well, and along those same lines, how are you guys thinking about the balance between the AI assistance that we're going to see for developers versus, the developer capabilities and their autonomy to do what they need to do?
Yeah, I mean, I believe a human always needs to be in the loop. I would not trust pushing AI generated code into production outside of consumer. Like if I was trying to create a website for a toddler's birthday, okay,
Mhm.
I don't think there's anything mission critical on the line there. But if it's, I'm a company and it's in my revenue producing product, it may help, but I'm going to not trust it right out of the gate. And that's fine. We'll be in that state for quite some time, but it will get better and we will start trusting it and it will start getting to a point where we may, trust but verify when it comes to the code it writes. And I think the degree at which that changes will depend on you, your risk appetite, your industry, right? I think cloud native companies that probably sit within 10 miles of Silicon Valley, where I am right now, are going to trust it a lot faster than banks on Wall Street. And that's fine. They should, right? It's just a different appetite. But yeah, so that to me is, I think, going to be the sort of the next frontier to look at around that area.
Excellent. Well, and when we were talking in the green room, you kind of gave a story about how you're using AI today and how you believe that really the future is going to be we're getting rid of certain products because everything's going to become a natural language. Man, I'd love to see if you could tell that story again, for everybody that's listening. I think a lot of people are going to, jive with that.
Yeah. Um, First of all, I think I'm the bane of my marketing team's existence because I have this workflow now where, so I live about 25 miles south of San Francisco where we have an office. And so it takes me about 45 minutes to commute in. And I've developed this new thing where I get in the car and I just start talking to ChatGPT. I put it in advanced voice mode and I just start talking to it. And it's really just transcribing what I'm saying. Then I get to the office and I take that transcription and I run it through a GPT I created that turns it into a blog, which is in my style because I trained it on my writing. And then I take it to another that then acts as its copy editor and developmental editor and fleshes out the idea. And so in maybe 60 minutes total, and that includes 45 minutes of commute, I can go from idea to fully formed blog. Now,
Mhm.
to your point, I never went into a word editor. In fact, today, the only reason why I take that blog, which sits in this case entirely in our ChatGPT instance, and put it into a Google Doc is because I have to share it with someone to comment.
Right.
Once that person is more comfortable coming into ChatGPT, I will never touch a word editor to create a blog ever again. I will use natural voice and run it through some basic bots. And so to me, I can only imagine there's an analog here to anything where the core job is an editor. And
Yeah.
that's what an IDE is. So it's not hard to imagine that we're moving away from these as constructs entirely.
That's an interesting approach, and that was one of the things that really caught me about your conversation was, I didn't use a word editor. I believe there's this thought that we're going to go the same way where we're going to see, people still use the editors today. We're still going to see IDEs out there because sometimes you're going to have to dig in, but I can see that percentage of work growing where it does become natural language. We're not using the IDE anymore. We're actually treating the agents as employees and saying, "Hey, here's your mission. Go fulfill your mission and come back to me." I think it's real exciting times. I look forward to seeing what's coming up.
Yeah, I love it too. It's going to be brave new times.
Well, and you kind of did some foreshadowing there when you talked about Kyle because we are going to be bringing Kyle on the show. So I'm hoping next week we're going to get Kyle, who's one of the founders of Coder, to come on. What do you think? I mean, you work with Kyle very closely. What do you think we're going to hear from Kyle about how this is going to work from a strategy perspective, from product and integration in with Coder?
Yeah, I mean, what one of the things I love about Kyle is he is just on the forefront and hands-on with this stuff. So you'll probably get a very advanced view. I learned something new from I joke he's where I go for my daily good vibes. Like I just go talk to him and what are you doing? And he shows me something and it gives me a lot of energy. So I think you'll enjoy talking to him, and then expect him to do lots of really cool analogies. I bet you he's probably gonna compare agentic AI to something wacky. That would be my guess.
Nice.
I
Yeah.
can't tell you
Well,
what. I don't know, but he'll do something funny.
well, anybody that knows me knows I love analogies. I think it's one of the best ways to get a concept across. So I look forward to hearing what Kyle's got to say to us. So, hey, I think you brought up a lot of real, things that are really going to stir some thoughts in people. I think that we're going to see some comments back on what you said. I mean, before we close off on this, I want to thank you for the show, but do you have any closing comments, any closing thoughts that you think need to be heard?
No, I just look, my request of anyone, regardless of the way you think about AI, is just do not operate from a place of fear.
Mhm.
Jump in, learn it. This stuff is not hard to get into. A lot of it's free, and just start using it. And if it's not in coding, start using it like I did for something else, email
Right.
writing or something. And to me, just you do not want to be on the sidelines of this, is my plea to people who are listening in.
I think that's great advice. I mean, we see this through tech. It's a sine wave that happens. New technology comes in, people get scared of it. They kind of curse its name. They eventually kind of adopt it, and then they say, oh, wow, this does make things easier. We're living in a world where work life balance is everything. If you can find ways to make yourself more efficient, to cut work hours out of your day, give you some time back to do things that you're interested in, I think it's 100% worth it. And this is going to be one of those things. I do think that we're going to see AI make bigger changes than what we've seen from some of the other things, and that's simply in how it operates. But
Yeah. And I don't know if you'll end up interviewing Ben Potter, our head of product, but ask him about his thoughts about going on a walk and talking to an agent. It's a
okay,
really mind-blowing concept.
well, I'll keep that in mind. We'll reach out to Ben and see if we can't get him on us first. But looking forward to talking to Kyle next week. And man, I really appreciate you coming on the show, giving us your thoughts on this. I'm looking forward to see what Coder does with Agentic AI moving forward, and maybe we can have you back on at some point to talk about all the new stuff that's come out.
Yeah, anytime, Nikki. Happy to jump.
All right. Well, thank you very much
All
for
right.
everybody that's watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you again next time.